How's it going, everybody? If you're new here, welcome in. And if you've been here before, welcome back. I'm Rollshambo, connoisseur and collector of all things sharp and shiny. And today we're going to be pitting the Spyderco Para 3 against its brother in Civil War, the Spyderco Smock. Which one should dominate your pocket? If you've been wondering which one you should carry and you can only buy one, we're going to go over that today. Now, before we get into that, I'm also extremely excited today because we are going to be, for the very first time and for every time moving forward, highlighting a random comment from the previous video as a way of me saying thank you, to give a little bit of airtime to the people that support this channel. Here's the kicker though. I'm not going to be filtering out comments. I'm only going to pick one unless I pick my own comment at random. Which means that I could get some really interesting, possibly negative comments from the previous video. For example, someone could say that they just, don't like how I modified my Spyderco Para 3. Like this guy. Hey, it's part of the game. When you put yourself out there on social media, you get people's opinions. Every single comment that I get helps my channel. It helps YouTube understand that people are engaging with my content and that it should push it to more people. So let's go ahead and check out how this is going to work as we, for the very first time in Rollshambo.edc history, select a comment at random to highlight on the channel. It's going to look a little bit like this. This is Comment Picker. It's the same website that I use for the giveaway, the same website that Metal Complex uses for his giveaways. And we're going to be putting this tool to good use for something else. I went ahead and I copied the URL for the very last video that I did, which was the review of the Cold Steel AD15. I almost said the Demco AD15. It is the Cold Steel AD15. I'm not going to be filtering duplicate users, which means that if you leave me multiple comments, they will have a chance at being highlighted. Also, I'm not going to include replies to comments because I don't want there to be out of context comments that I highlight because that could be confusing. It looks like it wants me to do some math here. 6 plus 8 is going to be 14. All right, so there was 13 comments on that last video that I uploaded yesterday. Thank you to everyone that commented. I definitely appreciate it. So let's see which comment we're going to be picking today. This one comes from my man Hungry Bird. Hungry Bird says Scorpion Lock. Thumbs up. Abso-freaking-lutely, my man. Listen, the Scorpion Lock on the AD15 makes this a verifiable folding fixed blade. There are other knives that have been before it that have similar locking mechanisms, but this is unique in the fact that it uses a yoke which has its own pivot and a spring, and it pivots independently of the knife instead of creating tension from a fixed point. For example, like some of you pointed out in the last video, the Buck Marksman or the CRKT Nerk tie. So yeah, Scorpion Lock, amazing lock. And if you don't have one yet, you should go out and get one. I overlooked this knife for far too long. Without further ado, let's go ahead and flip the camera around so that we can find out, is it going to be the Spyderco Smock, or is it going to be the original Titan, the original Sultan of Slash, and the king of my pocket for 2022, the Spyderco Para 3? Let's get into it. Ladies and gentlemen, this bout will go 5 rounds. In the blue corner, you have the Spyderco Smock. And in the red corner, the existing World Heavyweight Champion, the Spyderco Para 3. Alright, so that's my best rendition of an announcer's voice for a boxing fight. If you can't tell, I don't watch too much boxing. I'd actually prefer UFC, that's just me. But yeah, this is the head-to-head. The whole idea and premise behind this video is if you only could buy one, and you could only carry one, which one should dominate your pocket? And I'm going to base that off of 5 categories: materials, ergonomics, fidget ability, the lock, and fit and finish. Each category is worth 10 points for a total of 50 possible points. Now, no, nothing in this video gets a 10. You don't get 10s, in my opinion, under the $300 to $500 price point. I'm just going to throw that out there. But it's going to be interesting to see how each of these score. I've already scored them, and I'm going to explain to you exactly how they get there. For all intents and purposes, I want you to imagine that there's nothing custom or modified on either of these knives, and that I'm talking about them in their stock format, because I was just too lazy to put them back to stock. But bear with me. For the first round, round one is materials. So let's talk about these materials. For the Spyderco Smock, you get G10 handle scales with a steel liner, a carbon fiber sticker, and S30V. Now, I'm not a huge fan of S30V. I mean, I like it a lot better than many other steels, but it is chippy in most knives that I've encountered. Not so far in this one, but I haven't done any hard use scenarios with it to let it chip. So yeah, S30V is what I would consider a premium steel. Good edge retention, not too terribly hard to sharpen, but it's a pain when you have to sharpen out chips that you might eventually get if you actually do end up using this for, I don't know, something other than cutting cardboard. So just going to throw that out there. As far as the execution on the steel liners, I like that they're nice and thick. It actually adds some heft, and so it doesn't make it like the AD 20.5, which would be just way too damn thin. So the scales I can get past. G10 is fine, but they give you this carbon fiber sticker, and I personally would have rather seen a more full G10 or full carbon fiber rendition. You can, of course, get those on the aftermarket, but we are talking about these in the stock form, which means that for the Spyderco Smock on materials, it scores a 7. It's going to be odd talking about the materials on this bad boy because it is modified. However, the stock format of this is going to have S45 VN steel, and it's going to have full G10 handle scales that are very grippy, with, of course, a steel liner. With that combination, I also give the Para 3 a 7. I do think that the execution is a little bit better, but if we're just talking about materials in a vacuum, they're pretty much the same. The only thing that I would say is that S45 VN I do like a lot better than the, S30V. But in a vacuum, if we're talking premium versus premium, these are both a 7. Round number 2, ergonomics. Let's talk about the ergonomics on this Spyderco Smock. So generally speaking, I like the Ergos on here. The handle scales don't really force you to put your hands in any one type of position. And even though this choil is awkward, you can choke up on it. This choil is not even necessarily meant for sharpening, although it does add some relief there. The choil is so that when the knife closes, the blade doesn't bang against those bars right there in the back. So it has to be there. It's not necessarily a design choice. It's a design necessity, if you will. So on the Ergos, they're not great, they're not terrible. You do get some choice. However, if you choose to choke up, which you can, that is not a super comfortable choil. They could have achieved what they needed to achieve by cutting that out, and they could have made it more friendly, and they didn't. And, it doesn't kill it for me on this knife. Some people have reported that they like it. I don't mind having a choil there. I just think that the execution of that choil shape could have been a lot better. And for those reasons, on the Spyderco Smock, I give the ergonomics a 7. Let's go ahead and talk about the Ergos on the Spyderco Para 3. Now, I know what you're thinking. Hey, with these, custom Flytanium handle scales, how can you really judge this? Well, these are a 1-to-1 replica of the G10 scales. They're just titanium, okay? So I can really judge that just fine because they're going to be the same dimensions. This is just titanium. These handle scales are meant and they're shaped to fit the swell of your hand. And you get a real finger choil right there, which means that you can choke up, and it's comfortable in that position. It feels right in the hand. There are no hot spots, even more so if you were to change the clip out, which you can tell that I already did. And even with the stock clip, it's very comfortable. The big advantage that you're going to get with the Spyderco Para 3 over the Spyderco Smock when it comes to ergonomics is going to be in the shape of the handle scales. You do get a little bit less freedom. However, you get more versatility because the choil there is an actual finger choil, and it feels comfortable in the hand, at least in my hand. And for those reasons, I'm going to give the Spyderco Para 3 a 9 in the ergonomics. We've got our first lead so far. Let's keep it going. Next round, it's going to be Fidget Ability, and this is really where the Spyderco Smock shines. I mean, they're both super fidgety, but come on. When you turn the compression lock into a button lock, it just opens up a whole new world of fidget factor. Due to the slim nature of the handle scales, it makes it very versatile. On top of that, you don't just get the Spidey hole, you also get a flipper tab, which you can light switch, or if you could also push button it, and there's nothing that's going to come back around and bite your finger. So it's very versatile. And what makes a knife fidget friendly, in my opinion, is not necessarily how many options you have, but how easy and how confident is it to fidget with. Fidgeting with our knives is just something that we do, and honestly, I do encourage it because the more you fidget with your knife, the more you handle it, and the more confident you will be, the more natural it will feel in your hands. This Spyderco Smock really shines in the fidget area, and it is one of the, if not the most fidget-friendly knife that I have ever handled so far to date. For Fidget Ability, the Spyderco Smock comes in at a whopping 9. 9 is the highest score I could give this just because I haven't tried everything, so I don't really want to give something a 10 this far in, but 9 is pretty damn good. Let's talk about the Fidget Ability on the Spyderco Para 3. It also has the compression lock. However, it is your traditional compression lock. There is no extra button. So that means that after extended periods of fidgeting with this thing, your fingertip will get sore. It doesn't matter if you've built up calluses there, your fingers will get sore. You can reverse flick it, and you can also do a upside down reverse flick, which is one of my favorites. You can also do a blade drop, which is also one of my favorites. This is not something that you can do on the Spyderco Smock, at least not very well. It's not a seamless transition like it is on the Para 3, mainly because the width of the blade doesn't allow for it, but on the Para 3 it does. It's very fidget friendly. However, what kills it is the extended use of that compression lock, because to continue fidgeting with it, you're going to have to close it, and that is kind of an Achilles heel. That doesn't mean that this knife isn't extremely fidget friendly or that you can't fidget the hell out of this knife, because let's be honest, I absolutely have. It just means that it's not necessarily as fidget friendly as the Smock, and it comes in at a respectable 8. All right, now we're on to the lock, and I know what you're thinking. Dude, they both use a compression lock. How are you going to actually compare these two? And while yes, they both do use a compression lock, the execution of that compression lock is different. I already hinted to it in the Fidget Ability, and that is that the Spyderco Smock actually installs a button. And before people start saying, well, it's not really a button lock, I mean, I don't know what else you would call this. An assisted lever for the compression. The lock is the same as far as strength is concerned, and the lockup is going to be just as competent on both, but the ease of access to that lock in its stock format is unrivaled. This is the best execution of the compression lock that I have ever seen on any knife, and I would really love to see someone refute this, but that is just awesome. I love being able to do that, and you can use it just like a button where you deploy it like that as well. That means that you have a lot of versatility and also good strength. And before people start clowning me in the comments saying, well, I mean, it's not that strong, feel free to go out on YouTube and check out some of the strength test videos where they actually tested the compression lock and it turned out to survive better than a frame lock. That's just me. I'm not going to test it myself. Other people have, and if you haven't seen those videos, I definitely suggest it. So for the lock, this is getting an 8. I'm calling it an 8 so far because that lock does create this crappy choil right here. And so for those reasons, 8 is definitely respectable, definitely a high score and very well deserving. Now, this is the traditional rendition of the compression lock, which is this basically backwards liner lock. It is a tab that is easy to hit. And yes, you can get aftermarket options, which do turn it into more of a button, I guess you could say. But I don't really necessarily trust a button that you glue on or tack on or whatever. So we're just going to talk about this in its stock rendition. This version, which is the normal version, is something that I'm a really big fan of. For everyday carry purposes, it works phenomenal. And you only really get lock stick every now and then, especially if you take it apart and put it back together wrong or you don't oil it or whatever. You can get some lock stick, but it's not too hard to overcome. I really do like the compression lock in all of its current formats. It's just not quite as good as it is on the Spock with that button. So for those reasons, the Para 3 comes in with a lock of 7. Furthermore, we are going on to the fit and finish, and it is the 5th and final round. Fit and finish. This was made at the Taiwan factory. The Taiwan factory is the factory that Spyderco uses to make all of their high-end knives. It's also what they use to make a lot of their collaboration knives with, and it does a really good job. It is widely known that the Taiwanese factory puts out some of the cleanest tolerances that Spyderco can absolutely put out, and it really shows. Nothing on this knife was bad when I got it out of the box. Absolutely nothing. I didn't need to adjust the pivot. I didn't need to change a damn thing. The knife was super sharp. I shaved part of my arm with it. And yeah, while that's not an attractive look, it is an attractive look for the Spyderco Smock because they executed and delivered on this knife, which is why when they do come in stock, they don't last long. I highly suggest that you pick one up if you can because they do not last for long. The execution, fit, and finish on this knife is phenomenal. I'm going to give it a solid 8, and I think that that is a very respectable score. Finally, final round. What am I going to give the Spyderco Para 3 when it comes to fit and finish? Well, this was not made in the Taiwanese factory. It was made in the Golden, Colorado factory, which some people have said is not necessarily their best work. However, this knife is an icon. I can't speak for others. I can only speak for myself. And getting this knife brand new, the tolerances were great. I didn't have to adjust the pivot. It was nice and snappy out of the box. Everything was centered. Everything felt right and tight, but not necessarily too tight. There was no lockup issues. And it was the first knife that really made me fall in love with the compression lock. I carried this knife in its stock format for months and I absolutely loved it, and I would carry it in that format again. I loved it so much I invested in titanium scales as well as different pocket clip, titanium screws, a backspacer because you know how I feel about those backspacers. That being said, for the price point, I absolutely love it. The fit and finish on this knife in its stock format is definitely good enough, and you do not have to modify it like me if you don't want to. I didn't modify it because I didn't like it. I modified it because I did. I wanted to make it mine. So let's go ahead and tally up the scores, which I will go ahead and put right there on the screen. And of course, when we tally up the scores, we get 39 for both. It is a dead stinking tie. So I'm going to leave it up to you in the comment sections. Who do you think won? based on this tiebreaker, I am counting on you to tell me whichever gets the most votes will win the tiebreaker. That being said, I don't think you can go wrong with either of these knives. I will of course link them in the description below in case you want to pick up either one of them, and I'm positive that you will be happy with either, especially if you get the Smock. I would get that first personally, just because you can always pick up a pair of 3, but the Smock does tend to go out of stock and stay out of stock for quite a while after it does. Guys, that's all I've got for you. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I will see you in the next one.